such tense music. I know that this music probably gets your hackles up just like thinking about those days of biochemistry, right? Um, and what you have to look forward to next year in chemistry. I know it's not a fun subject, but it is very interesting stuff. And you know me, I love the enzyme, and that's why we will cap off this lecture on biochemistry. And so we will talk a lot about the basics of the atom and building compounds because, like I said, the year was meant to get bigger. We would start small at the atom and just keep growing. We took a few diversions there along the way, but we did finally get to the biosphere, right? The entire part of the earth where life can exist. We started at the atom and we got to the biosphere. So this lecture will just take you through the real basics, as all of these do. They don't go into the super crazy details like we did in class. These lectures were just meant to do quick one-day reviews or to share them with you if you were away, just to help you review for the Regents. So I made these just to help anybody get ready for the Regents exam, so I figure I'll use these slideshows to help you just recap what we learned this year and hopefully remember the good old times. And we're going to get started without a fact of the day. You'll have to wait till the end of the lecture because it's got a cool picture on this slideshow with the fact of the day. So, what is the chemistry of life, right? Bio means life. Chemistry is the chemistry of life, as we call it, biochemistry. So we've got to start small. What makes up a living thing smaller than the basic unit of life, which, as we just talked about, is a cell? Well, those smaller parts have smaller parts, and we call them atoms. Now, the thing about atoms is atoms make up all things, living and non-living things. Atoms take up space and have mass. But atoms can be found in different forms: solid, liquid, gas. There are atoms in this space between me and this computer screen, right? There's oxygen in this air and carbon dioxide and mostly nitrogen, right? So there's atoms that are in all forms all around us, and they make up living things and non-living things. We talked about the three parts: your positive proton, your negative electron, and your neutral neutron, right? And the electron is the one on the outside. That was the one that we were most concerned about because it was on the outside and electrons are involved in bonding, right? And so, excuse me. So we talked about some other basic terms: matter, mass, and the element. We only were going to focus on the big four, really: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, because that's 96% of all living things. And so we talked about that very quickly, but we want to get bigger. We didn't want to focus on all 92 naturally occurring atoms, even though I was really interested in Chernobyl at the time, and that was, there were some atoms in there that were pretty interesting. Anyways, we wanted to get bigger. We wanted to take those carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, and oxygen and start to put them together into the compounds of life, hence biochemistry. So first thing we did was we looked at the bonds: covalent bonds, which are what most organic molecules are made up of, and ionic bonds, which are also important bonds for us to understand because we do manipulate materials that are held together by ionic bonds. And of course, without hydrogen bonding, not a true bond, there would be no life on Earth as we know it, because it is more of an attractive force that attaches water to itself and other things, that whole adhesion and cohesion. Right? Ionic bonds, if you remember, are from the transfer of electrons to create ions so that they have a positive and negative attraction. The covalent bond was where we share electrons. This outer shell called the valence shell, right? None of these were completely full. These two guys needed two to be full in their valence shell. Oxygen needed to be full if it had 8 in its outer shell. And so we can share electrons, so everybody has a full valence shell, and sharing electrons is what covalent bonds do. Here is your hydrogen bond, which is not quite a bond. It is just an attractive force between the negative end and the positive end of a water molecule. Talked about polarity and polar molecules versus nonpolar molecules, where one has a charge and one doesn't. And water has a charge. It has a negative end and a positive end. And so water is naturally attracted to itself. Water makes life possible for many reasons. One of the big ones, of course, is that is the medium where chemical reactions usually take place. It's where life was born. Right? In the seas, life was born because of water. Materials can diffuse right through water. Cells are made mostly up of water. So in the beginning, we needed it. As life became more complex, we still used water in those complex parts, whether they were joints or different specialized cells or specialized body systems, all the way up to organisms, how they figured out ways to still keep water in, even though the nearest source of water could be hundreds of miles away. I wish this was a jade plant. You know, we could use that as an example of knowing how important water is and how it's adapted. But anyways, there are 101 reasons why we need water, and I could talk all day about it, but it's just going to make me thirsty. So we got to have chemical reactions so that we can make and break bonds, right? If we want to get these bigger molecules, we've got to have a chemical reaction so that we can make bonds. But also, our body takes in materials and digests them and breaks bonds so we can use those things. And so we look at both reactions in biology. And so we also look at how they're organized. Before a reaction, we have our reactants that are going to react. And on the other side, after a reaction takes place, we have products. All right, take a deep breath. All right, remember, enzymes are catalysts. A catalyst is anything that helps to start or speed up a reaction, right? In your car, you have a spark plug, and that is the spark that ignites the gas so that the gas goes kaboom and blows up and causes your combustion engine to release the energy in the gas to propel your car forward, right? Our bodies have our own types of catalysts, and all living things have them. They're called enzymes, and they're not fancy spark plugs. They're just proteins that are just woven into a specific shape, and that specific shape helps to make or break bonds. They're the most amazing thing, because without enzymes, we wouldn't be able to do anything. The classic example I give is for you to digest food outside of your body, you have to put it in a pot of boiling water for hours and hours to say turn your pasta into actual mush, right? You would have to put that pasta on the boiling stove for hours. Now, your stomach can digest that pasta down to its small molecules, and your stomach never raises above 98.6 degrees. Why? Enzymes. Okay, we'll leave it at that. The Regents was really big on what factors affect enzymes, temperature and pH, as we looked at in the saliva lab, where the enzymes in your saliva work at a pH of 7, but the enzymes in your stomach, right, they work at a pH much lower as it is more acidic in your stomach. And so that was one of the examples where enzymes have a specific shape, and if we change the pH or the temperature, then it could cause them to denature and change shape and not be able to fit to their specific substrate, right, the thing they react with, to be able to get the reaction they needed. And then, of course, the concentration of the enzyme or the substrate is simply just a mathematical problem. So, let's talk about those biological molecules. How do we get those bigger molecules? What are they called? Well, first of all, molecules are organic if they contain carbon as a backbone. And that's what living things are made up of, is organic molecules. And they have a carbon backbone. That's why our exceptions are carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide. They kind of are not organic molecules. They existed before life began, and they don't follow the same rules of having a carbon backbone structure with hydrogens and oxygens as well. Now, these organic molecules form smaller molecules. They are called monomers. These monomers can join together, right? Mono meaning one, can join together to make polymers, many. And the polymers that we studied were polysaccharides, right, which we refer to as complex carbohydrates, right? And their monomer is monosaccharides, or simple sugars. The second one that we looked at was the protein. Proteins are made up of amino acids. The next one we looked at were lipids, like fats, oils, and waxes, and they're made up of a glycerol head and 3 fatty acid tails. And the last one was the DNA molecule, which is made up of nucleotides. And even further than that, right, you learn that a nucleotide has nitrogen base, 5-carbon sugar, and a phosphate group. So whichever way makes sense in your head, I put a few different examples up here, right, of here are all the carbon compounds, here they are, here are their building blocks, but of course they're all made up of the big 4: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and sometimes nitrogen in the case of protein and nucleic acids. Sometimes you just look at them in picture form, right? I always tried to draw really bad hexagons for you guys to remind you of what your polysaccharides and monosaccharides were, your lipids, right? You've got your glycerol head and your fatty acid tails. A protein is just a long chain of amino acids, and sometimes they form shapes, sometimes they're fibrous. And then good old RNA, in this case it's half. If we had another side, that would be DNA, made up of these nucleotides. And of course you can't read that from here, but that's just some further follow-up information. Here are your basic building blocks if you look at them that way. And here is your fact of the day. Oh, this one's so cool and cute at the same time. I hope my camera didn't go out of focus. And of course, this is a tarantula. This is a little frog. Now, this frog is actually in no danger because this frog helps to protect the nest of this mother tarantula. There are other insects that want to come and eat the tarantula eggs and baby tarantulas that will be born in this nest. And this frog actually helps to keep them away while, of course, getting a well-protected space to grab a bite to eat when it needs it. So this is a good example of mutualism. You should check it out because it also looks scary and cute at the same time. So that is biochemistry. We will talk next time as we get bigger and we build those proteins and nucleic acids and fats and oils and waxes into cells. We'll see you later.